The Napa Valley, jam-packed with hundreds of premium wineries and thousands of acres of coveted vineyards, has earned its position as the country's #1 winemaking region. The narrow, scenic valley is defined on the east by a series of hills known as the Vaca Range, and on the west by the rugged peaks of Mayacamas Mountains, including the steep forested slopes of Mount Veeder. Only 2% of the world enjoys a dry Mediterranean climate. In Napa Valley, this generous climate provides vintage-to-vintage consistency and exceptional. The valley has a remarkable diversity of volcanic, alluvial and maritime soil types, ranging from well-drained gravel loam to dense clays to the thin, rocky soils of the hillside vineyard.
Miles south of Bordeaux as far as latitude. And so, in order to make a wine taste like a cool climate, Stag's Leap wine cellars, Warren Winiarski made his wine to taste and emulate. He blended it, aged it, and even used bits of stem to recreate the green flavors of a cooler climate. And so Stag's Leap Wine Cellars was probably the most important winery in the Stag's Leap district. And today there are 22 main wineries for Stag's Leap. We were founded in 1978, 2 years after. So that was the main event. And many people, like the Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, tried to emulate French-style wines. However, late 80s and 90s, Wine Spectator and Robert Parker started to award higher scores to wineries that were producing more fruit-forward Cabernet varietal wines. And Pine Ridge in 1995 had one of the highest scoring collections of Cabernets in the valley. We grow grapes in Howell Mountain, Rutherford, Oakville, and Stag's Leap District. And so since about 1995, we've focused on raising quality through farming. We have 25 full-time farmers who take care of the vineyards, 180 acres, north, south, east, and west. And Fortis is our flagship cab, and then the rest will be Howell Mountain, Rutherford, Oakville, Stag's Leap. And then the Napa cab is our bread and butter as far as the national and international markets.
Correct.
For a classic valley floor Cabernet. So, question? So it was the judgment of Paris that set forth a lot of what we see today in Napa. However, it kind of caused people to try to emulate the French style. However, there is now a very more defined Napa style that is, of course, rich and lavish, but the region is rich and lavish, so it kind of matches. There are 150 approximately different soil types and subsoils, which are, for the most part, good drying soils, low biomass, low nutrient level, but they cause the vine to work hard. So that's one aspect. Soils will affect the overall development of seed flavors and tannins. But also you have the grapes, especially Cabernet, needs 180 days of bright sunshine to properly ripen each year. So you're going to get subtle degree day differences from one region to the next. For instance, Stag's Leap District, these palisades behind me, the sun rises over those palisades and they begin in shadow, but by the end of the day, those rocks are basked in 100-degree heat. At night, that heat rises off the rocks and pulls in cool air off of the bay. So Stag's Leap can go from 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of the afternoon to 50 degrees Fahrenheit with chilly winds to chill down the fruit. So Stag's Leap District has the acidity of a wine that can age and go well with numerous dishes. However, it does have the balanced fruit to entice anyone, even as a young wine. So you can sip on these wines, age them, pair them with food. They're very adaptable and very distinct. But each region has its own. You could call Stag's Leap a miniature mountain range, and lots of microclimates within Stag's Leap. But then Oakville or Calistoga, different soil types, different degree days, different rainfall. So there are master sommeliers and people who have been in the valley a long time who can smell a wine and tell you where in the valley it came from. So 16 main AVAs, 17 you could say, nested appellations, 150 soil types and 26 mesoclimates, and millions of microclimates. So that's what the difficult thing is when you farm a climate. You have hillside versus a little bit more flat. You're going to pick them and farm them differently. So we divide our vineyards into blocks and pick each block at optimum ripeness. The beginnings of the grape, the flowers self-pollinate. So as long as we have no rain and good conditions, the flowers will pollinate and create a good fruit set. And at this point it looks like we have a very big fruit set. So halfway through the year, our vineyard manager will decide whether to keep all of the fruit or maybe to pare back the fruit to focus the quality. The vines will continue to grow quickly, and it's our way to try to incentivize them to, through farming, through leaf positioning, through shoot, to focus the quality of the vine on the fruits. So we tend to farm at closer to 2 to 4 tons per acre.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're gonna discuss about the hillside and the valley side.
So traditionally in France or Italy, the hillside vineyards were sought after because the soils were more poor and you get more extreme stressful growing conditions, which cause the vine to focus its energy on developing fruit. But here in Napa, the valley floor can tend to have the best fruit in some cases because you can plant relatively densely, increasing the stress load on the vine. But then the sun is going to be over the vine throughout the whole day, darkening the fruit, producing that rich dark cab that Napa is known for. But on hillsides, you have to farm a little bit more carefully. Hillsides like this, literally 4 feet down, these vines will hit solid rock. So there's very little buffer for them if there's an extreme heat wave or lack of water. So we irrigate very carefully, on average about 1 gallon of water every 2 weeks per vine, and just enough to keep the root base cool. Now on a hillside, you'll tend to get more sun during one part of the day than the other. So sometimes the hillside fruit will tend to produce more red fruit qualities because the skin doesn't darken as deeply. But the acid and the alcohol can be much higher on a hillside. So it takes very careful farming and very careful winemaking to balance the wine. Most of our wines will be blended. We'll use a combination of hillside and valley floor to get a broad gamut of fruit and balance.
800 feet elevation.
Mm-hmm.
So we keep it original, the way Brother Timothy planted it, and there's no trellis here. It's also dry farmed. There's no irrigation here.
Mm-hmm.
And so our guys, they go through and they pick Cabernet Sauvignon. They go through one time, and we make it and we give it to the Christian brothers that live next door to us.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really good relationship with them. And they come over, and in the fall we have a blessing of our grapes, and we have food, we have wine. On our mountain, we do use trellises. And we do use irrigation, but here, because we're green certified, we only turn our irrigation on if our reservoirs reach a certain water level. This year we're not in the drought, so we'll get to irrigate our vines. What doesn't get used, our lizards come up and they sleep on the moss in here, and we'll have the birds will come down and try to, because they get sleepy from eating fermenting bugs. Sales rep has you tasting the Torrontés, a shirt tail Sauvignon Blanc,
Mm-hmm.
our Mount Veeder cab,
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to ask you if there's one more you would like to try, if you'd like to try another red wine or... Gravity flow is how he produced his wine. So the ceiling and the beams here are made from the redwood trees, and the original stone here is quarried right here on the property behind the winery. This is made out of a lot of limestone and a lot of sandstone. So when Gare built it, he didn't put in, there was no metal in there. The walls are 2 feet thick. Look how cool it is in here. So we had the earthquake retrofit in here, and Donald Hess, when he remodeled, he put these steel beams in the corners. When we had our earthquake in 2014, we had a 6.1 earthquake. This building virtually survived. But the rest of the winery we've been doing for 2 years now, almost 3 coming up in August. Piece by piece by piece by piece, we've had to remodel, including our tasting room. Yeah, we lost half of our Mount Beater cab. Our tanks crumpled, and it poured into the garden, and our garden was pink with Cabernet.
Oh, wow.
You can see it on Facebook.
In spite of its international renown, Napa Valley is one of the smallest wine growing region in the world, with only 1/6 the planted acreage of Bordeaux. Most of the wineries are family-owned businesses. The region's established viticulture practices results in low yields of high-quality grapes, from which the skilled winemakers craft Napa Valley's renowned wines.